25 years ago, an extraordinary movie changed the face of modern cinema. I was 11 years old when The Exorcist opened in America on Boxing Day 1973, and I can remember like yesterday the amazing reaction it caused. You couldn't open a newspaper or turn on the television without coming across some account of audiences queuing all night round the block just to see the film, only to dash out of the theatres, some of them straight into the nearest church.
We meant to make a good movie. We meant to make a scary movie. But I had no idea that it was going to be that good or that scary.
You left her alone, you guys! I'll never forgive you!
The effect was really searing on a lot of people because this wasn't just The Omen, it wasn't just Rosemary's Baby. It had a psychological, religious impact.
It's not a film about Dracula. It's not a film about the alien. It is a film about people who live up the street. It's about a real street in a real town with real people living in it, in the house, and upstairs on the third floor of this house is a real little girl who happens to be possessed by a demon.
All right, let's see what the... Keep away! This hour's mine.
The film kind of, from being a horror film, became kind of a phenomenon, testing people's stamina. And you heard people saying that I was there, and when I was there, there were 3 people who fainted and were carried out, and there was one at my side who threw up.
I was as much watching what was going on, not believing that the world, that people could react in that way. I mean, I was like, why are they reacting? It's a movie.
The film delivers to this very day that very precious commodity, a powerful emotional response. Well, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't matter. It's a response. You were alive during those 2 hours.
The story of The Exorcist is an enthralling one about the possession and exorcism of a young girl, not in some Transylvanian Netherland, but right here in modern-day Washington, D.C. For some, it was the greatest advert for Catholicism the world had ever seen. For others, it was a monstrosity that carried in its celluloid the mark of the devil. For me, as an 11-year-old not old enough to see the film, just watching the trailer was a nerve-jangling experience from which I have never fully recovered.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world, the world of darkness.
I started writing The Exorcist because I frankly was unemployed. Comedy writing, which was my forte, and exclusively, had dried up. So I thought, all right, I have nothing better to do, and I might prove that I can write respectably in another medium. I had no concept whatever of what was to come.
The one hope, the only hope, The Exorcist.
The fictional story of The Exorcist can be traced back to some real-life events that happened in 1949, not in the upmarket surroundings of Georgetown, but about 10 miles away on this much more ordinary street in a Maryland suburb.
Well, in 1949, I believe I was a junior at Georgetown University. And in class, I heard some details about a so-called case of possession and an exorcism that was going on somewhere nearby.
Now, exactly what happened is the subject of much speculation. You can interpret the events in a number of different ways. What we do know is that for a period of about 3 months, a 14-year-old boy who'd grown up in this area and had been experimenting with a Ouija board underwent some form of illness that caused his personality to change, caused welts and lettering to appear on his body, and apparently caused some poltergeist activity.
Apparently, branding, such as the Help Me in The Exorcist in the film, would appear all over this boy's body, sometimes visual depictions of a face on his back. Also on the back, I believe, were the words spite and hell. The boy was of a Lutheran family, and the family had gone to their minister, who told them, let the boy stay in my house overnight. Well, all hell broke loose in that man's home. He then said, look, I don't know what to tell you about this. The Catholics claim to be able to deal with that sort of thing, and you might go to a Jesuit priest.
How do you go about getting an exorcism?
When I first heard about this case, it struck me immediately that if one can demonstrate credibly the existence of evil spirits, now we're into spirits. I mean, if there are devils or demons, there can be angels, and at the very least, a spiritual dimension to intelligence.
This is the cup of my blood. The blood of the new and everlasting covenant, the mystery of faith.
My exploration, looking back on it now, didn't occur to me at the time, but my exploration of this subject matter and digging and digging and digging to find proof that, yes, this happened. This wasn't made up. This occurred, and we have no explanation for it. No one has yet to offer an explanation for it based upon the material universe. And that was all grounded in the terror of total obliteration of death. That's what that was all about. I mean, it was a personal pilgrimage of my own.
Gave to your holy apostles the power to tramp underfoot serpents and scorpions.
Many, many, many years later, it all came back to me, and I determined to write that story. Now, I was intimidated. No, I'm writing something serious now. And dramatic.
Some of their problems come down to faith, their vocation, the meaning of their lives, and I can't cut it anymore.
Father Tom Birmingham was in the film and was the technical advisor. Taught me in high school. Anyway, I went to him looking for help.
So I said, well, I'll work with you then if, on one condition, that you take it seriously. I don't want another Rosemary's Baby. I want somebody that really will confront the awesome problem of the evil in God's world. So we worked for a year before he wrote the first page.
I'd written women in comedies, but I'd never written a woman in a real solid story. And so I cast about him, who do I want? I don't want someone who looks as though she might be a Stepford wife or was brought up in Salem. I want someone like my good friend, Shirley MacLaine. Here's a woman who is bright, and yet, in a way, she is just as ordinary as a supermarket shopping cart. So that you will not be prepared for this person to have a child who is possessed, or whom she claims may be possessed.
I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
Novel is one thing where the imagination can work, but you put it on the screen and you objectify. I mean, this story was begging to be a flop and could easily have turned into a laugh riot. Every studio passed. They were just afraid. I wasn't sure there was a movie in it. And I thought, this needs an honest director that is not Catholic, that is agnostic on the subject, and can give this incredible story such a sense of documentary reality that it will work. I had seen The French Connection, and I wanted Billy Friedkin. And the Warner Brothers then grudgingly agreed.
After I was finally signed to direct the film, Bill said to me, now I have to tell you I have a great surprise. Here is my screenplay. And I took it home and eagerly read through it, and I thought it was not very good. I thought it was overwrought. I thought that it was filled with a lot of symbolism and underlined, and it wasn't the novel.
I thought that in order to deliver the novel faithfully, I had to do an extraordinary amount of compression up front. And to do that compression of the front end of the story, of the first third actually, required tricks. I remember 8 million flashbacks. Everything, it was a jumble.
I thought those adaptations he made were unnecessary, and I believed in the novel, which I told him, and I then took the copy of the book that he sent me and I marked it up with passages that I felt we could film.
Every night he would reread the novel, and he'd make these notes, and he'd come in and he'd say, I think we ought to start with this scene, then go to that scene and that scene. And we went through the whole book that way.
Well, what's wrong?
Well, why are they tearing the building down?
Shall we summon the writer? He's in Paris, I believe.
Hiding?
Knocking.
I was handed this cast by fate. Burstyn, for example. The studio wanted either Jane Fonda at that time, Audrey Hepburn, or Anne Bancroft. Jane Fonda, she said, why would I want to be involved with a capitalist rip-off piece of shit like this? She was in her anti-Vietnam phase. In the meantime, I got a call out of the blue from Ellen Burstyn. I had seen her in the last picture show, where she was very good in a small part. She said, well, I want to do Chris McNeil. I said, well, I have to tell you that, you know, the studios offered it out to 3 other actresses. They want a star. And she said, I understand all that, but she said, I think I'm destined to play this part, so I'd love to meet you.
He said, all right, I'll tell you, I'm not going to keep you dangling. It's between you and he mentioned another actress. And he said, and I'm flying to New York tonight to see her.
But by this time, I realized that Burstyn was so supremely intelligent, understood what we were doing.
He called me from New York and said, all right, you've got the part. And I said, oh, you saw her? And he said, no, I ran into her in the deli last night and she looked like hell. And I said, well, Billy, that's not fair. I look like hell in the deli too. And he said, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
You really don't want me to play, huh?
No, I do. Captain Howdy said no.
There were hundreds, if not thousands, of young women looked at for the part of Reagan.
I was a working child actor in New York doing modeling and commercials.
She was not even recommended by her agency. They had recommended about 30 or 40 other of their clients for that role, not Linda Blair. Linda Blair's mother brought her in on her own.
And Mother says to me, she said, we have an interview for a movie. And it's like, oh, really? Because you get, movies, that was still exciting. I didn't grow up in Hollywood. So I went in and met with the casting people. They gave me the dialogue, which was, like a paragraph of the worst language you could ever imagine.
You fucking bastard!
And so I went in and read this filth. And when I was done, I went downstairs and I was like, how am I going to tell Mom about this? What? I can't tell her what I just had to say.
I then decided to film this one scene. It was in an empty sound stage. The studio saw it, and they, since there were no star names involved with a 12-year-old girl, if I believed in her, go ahead. And the thing is that she is perfect.
Then he would have meetings where he'd ask me to start acting out things like, okay, now what I want you to do is, get on the couch and writhe around in pain. Well, I was embarrassed. I was just embarrassed. And that's really what it was. He wanted to see how stable I was. So he realized I was very stable, went to a public school. I'm a Christian, and in my religion, we never discussed the devil. So to me, it was a fictitious character like people think of Frankenstein or something like that. It wasn't real to me.
Well, then let's introduce ourselves. I'm Damien Karras.
And I'm the devil. Now kindly undo these straps.
If you're the devil, why not make the straps disappear?
There were a lot of actors who wanted to play Karras in The Exorcist. Jack Nicholson wanted to play the part, Paul Newman, everybody, almost every male star in Hollywood. But I didn't want a known actor. What I was really looking for was a priest who could act.
He came to see my play that championship season on Broadway.
And I felt that it just reeked of failed Catholicism.
I said, you want me to do the screenplay, right? He said, no. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to do a screen test for Father Karras. I said, you what?
And it was incredible. The camera loved him.
Father Karras. It's an honor to meet you, Father.
Von Sydow, I think, was the finest screen actor of that day from his films with Ingmar Bergman. Blatty had told me that the person he had in mind for this character was the French Jesuit priest Teilhard de Chardin, and it's Max von Sydow to me.
Of course, my approach was colored by my, say, Protestant upbringing. To me, the devil has never been scary. I was brought up with Scandinavian fairy tales and folk tales, and in many of those, the devil is kind of ridiculous. He's always a loser. Of course, I was totally aware of the fact that Father Merrin, he believes.
I'd like you to go quickly across to the residence, Damien, and gather up a cassock for myself, 2 surplices, a purple stole, and some holy water.
It was not important whatever my personal or private opinions were.
When I met with him, I realized how young he actually was. He had often played older in Bergman films, so we knew it was going to be a lot of makeup for him, but he was like a guaranteed performance.
I believe we should begin.
Do you want to hear the background of the case first, Father?
Why?
And then Billy thought to cast Tom Birmingham, Father Birmingham, as the president of Georgetown. You can't get that sense of genuine sanctity from an actor. And then I introduced Father Bill O'Malley to Billy. Billy fell in love with him for the part of Father Dyer.
Friedkin hired him, and also Tom Birmingham, because they were priests, not because they were actors.
They were kind of good luck charms, you know. How am I doing, you know? I had to ask permission from the provincial, and he kind of rolled his eyes toward heaven and said, well, why not? And he had read the script, so he knew that it was really trying to say something significant about religion. It wasn't just, you know, a scary movie. It was a movie that was talking about evil.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
It deals with very heavy forces. And I was a little worried about what that would mean to work with those.
Of course, on a 15-month schedule, as we had, you certainly expect the laws of probability would presume that certain things would happen. But in my 32 years of making films, I've never had a set burned down. And we did on The Exorcist.
We had a fire that was still a mystery.
The set caught on fire one weekend when no one was there.
I remember that was terrible. Shut down. I think it shut us down for about 6 weeks.
They couldn't find an electrical problem. They couldn't find an arsonist. They couldn't find any substantial reason that occurred.
When I was filming, I would go to this little restaurant, which was in the Jesuit quarters, and sit there and study my lines. I was in there one day, and this very, very old priest, he handed me this little medal of the Blessed Virgin. He said, you know why I'm giving you this? I said, why? He said, I want to tell you something about intervention. Did you ever hear the concept of intervention? I said, no. He said, it's a Gnostic concept. It comes out of the 15th century. If you do anything on the devil, anything at all on the devil, to reveal him as the trickster that he is, he will seek retribution against you.
or he will even try to stop what you're trying to do, to unmask him. And he said, this metal will protect you. He said, be very careful, you take care of yourself. Maybe about 3 days later, it's kind of catacombed there, the Jesuit estates. And they have all these side rooms, like little sitting rooms, maybe 4 or 5 of them when you walk down the hall. So I'm walking down the hall going to dinner one day, and I walk by, and on the periphery of my mind, I said, did I see a casket in there? And I walk back, and I look in the room, and there's this old priest in a casket, dead.
Just through attrition, I think there was 3 or 4 people died.
There were a couple of unfortunate deaths during the filming.
There were 9 deaths, which is an enormous amount of deaths connected with the film. Some very directly, like the actor Jack McGowan, who gets killed in the film, completed shooting, and died.
It's very simple. If you have a production that lasts 2 weeks or 3 weeks, nothing happens. But if you have a production that lasts for a year or 9 months, lots of things have to happen. Accidents one way or the other.
Max von Sydow's brother died. The assistant cameraman whose wife had a baby during the shoot, the baby died. The man who refrigerated the set died. The young black night watchman.
And these weren't casualties from stunts or things like that. These were kind of men standing behind a camera all of a sudden, dropping dead.
Of course, it always makes for great stories about what happens, if it was cursed or whatever.
It's very good for publicity, but if you don't believe in devil, you don't believe in curses. Simple.
Then Friedkin called me and said, would you come down and exorcise the set? So I said, no, Billy, no. I don't want to increase anxiety or anything like that. And we probably are not dealing with anything more than accidents of one kind or another. But what I will do is think of something else. So then I said, what am I going to do? I said, well, I guess they want me to do a Catholic thing. So I went down and I told them all, everybody was there, including the Teamsters, and Max von Sydow had just arrived. And so I gave them a blessing, and then I said, now I'm going to give you my own view of what it's like to do exactly what everybody in this room is doing. All of us are made in the image and likeness of God, and we all mirror him in some way. And what all of you are doing is marvelous. You mirror the creativity of God.
I designed the film so that there would be blazingly bright scenes, as in Iraq, and then there would be these dark scenes in the attic and the exorcism room, and that the whole film would, in a way, alternate between the forces of dark and light in a kind of literal way.
I went to school. I graduated from Georgetown. I then was stationed in the Air Force in Washington, D.C. for a time. I knew it.
The Kennedys live there. It's filled with important people, congressmen, government people, writers, etc.
And I knew instantly that this was cinematic as hell, especially in the fall when we shot there, with the leaves falling and you know, nice breezes that came and went unexpectedly.
This is the precipitous flight of steps down which Father Damien Karras throws himself at the end of The Exorcist. He dies just about down there. When William Peter Blatty was a student at Georgetown University, these steps were known as the Hitchcock steps. because of their slightly eerie quality. But over the last 25 years, they've become the Exorcist steps, a place where fans of the movie come from all over the world to take in the atmosphere, pay homage, and leave their mark.
The first time I saw them, I saw that there was an ominosity, if that's a word, to them. I mean, I saw them, I thought, wow, how is the stunt? I'm not going to do it. How is the stunt man going to do this? Because they were vertical.
There were 97 hard stone steps. It looked like forever going down there. And so I went out and I got all the rubber I could find, 1/2 inch, and I lined every one of those steps with rubber.
And all the Georgetown kids, with the little capitalists that they are, they got the roofs of all the people around there on top of the roofs, and they sold tickets for $5 a head so you could watch the stunt. And he dove down those stairs twice. I asked him how he did it. He said Zen. I said, what's that? He said, complete and total non-resistance. My body becomes totally relaxed.
This is the place where one of the most famous images of modern cinema was created. Father Merrin arriving at the house on Prospect Street on a foggy night with light shining down on him from Reagan's bedroom window. As you can see in real life, it doesn't look anything like the movie. The reason is Reagan's bedroom never existed. It was part of a huge facade that was built onto the side of this house in order to make it overlook those steps.
I remember when we were preparing for the film, Billy was going to art museums and looking through art books and finding images that inspired him. And that famous shot that was used in the ad of Mark standing looking at the house, I think, although the composition is different, it was inspired by a Magritte. And of course, the thing in Magritte is that it's always very truthful, but then there's this oddness that happens within the realism.
That shot was conceived by Billy and Owen Roisman, our cameraman, to be something extraordinary.
The shaft of light does everything. It's like an ethereal quality to it. The fact that he's silhouetted in it, the graphics of it, the whole thing, it just feels very spiritual and very ethereal. We just see this cab arrive, and now all of a sudden there's this huge spotlight, this shaft, aiming right at this person. So you know there's something special about it.
Although the exteriors of The Exorcist were shot in Georgetown, the interiors were shot here at what used to be the Seacoast Studios in New York's 54th Street. It was here that production designer Bill Malley oversaw the construction of the entire interior of the McNeil house.
This was a very preliminary sketch of the party sequence to show the skeleton of the house and what can be seen from room to room. We never thought about anything to do with a horror film. Even then, we were thinking of doing the dining room with the Chinese decorations and wallpaper and the screens we had here. One of the spooky parts of it is the contrast, rather than, you know, thinking you're going to go in and you're going to see the darkness and the chambers and the chains and the bats flying around.
Hey, I think we've got a guest.
You're gonna die up there.
It makes it a little more, it could happen to you.
Honey.
This was a very pristine, well-kept home, very chic, very light colors. These were beautiful people. They had all the advantages and they lived well. All of a sudden, this horrendous thing happens to them.
First of all, you wanted to see these things happen as realistically as possible. I knew of no way to achieve these effects realistically with opticals in the state they were in then. Today, it would be a piece of cake. Today, they can make you believe that the Titanic is sinking. In those days, I could not, with an optical, make you believe that a bed was thumping on its own. It had to happen on the set, and it was a case of trial and error.
Marcel Vercateur, the special effects man, who was brilliant, he conceived and designed all those effects so that you couldn't see anything. I mean, everything was built in. They're just amazing.
He was a strange soul, like me, an experimenter and a perfectionist.
We started off with one particular thing, just elevating the bed like.
Amen. Oh, Lord, hear my prayer.
So what I did was put enough weight and leverage behind to raise the bed. Then I pulled it back down again.
Almighty Lord.
So the bed was trying to fly, but it couldn't because I was pulling it back. It really worked well. But anyways, we got so many things that I built another bed, and then I built another bed. So I had 3 beds.
Hasten to our call for help.
So all these beds all did different things. The room itself was sitting on 8 pneumatic wheels in order to create the earthquake.
All of that work in that room was excruciating to get because it was all done mechanically.
There's something perfectly...
I said to Billy, if I was a devil, I'd get up and grab it, and I would thrash her. I would let her know. He said, go ahead and do it.
What's happening? Stop! It's burning!
It's a rigging that Marcel Vercateur came up with that was a mold of my back, and it was like a hard metal. And then they had like a brace around my stomach, and then it was laced up on the sides.
I had her completely strapped in, and I had her.
It was actually manually pumped by some big man on the other side of the wall.
I could throw her up and back, and I had her.
And the lacing came loose while I was being thrown, and so as I went forward, the piece was coming back. So it was a constant. And the dialogue was, please make it stop, it hurts, it burns, whatever.
She started screaming.
I didn't know what to do. And so I'm just yelling, it hurts really, really, and somebody thought I yelled Billy. And I actually never broke character. That's the footage I use in the movie where I'm crying my eyes out because they are brutally damaging my back.
I had a rig around my midriff with a wire coming out the back, and the stuntman was pulling me.
So we took her back the first time, and it was a good shot. And Billy said, we're going to do it again.
I said, Billy, he's pulling me too hard. I can get hurt. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. I said, I understand, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. And the stuntman was standing there listening to this, and Billy said to him, okay, don't pull her so hard. But as I turned away, I felt them exchange a look.
And he said, give it to her this time. And I said, really? And he says, give it to her. And this is Ellen Burstyn, right? She's a nice lady. And so I said, okay. So when I hauled off, she came completely off her feet.
You see me hit and you see me reach for my back. I screamed in horrendous pain. Billy motioned to Owen to tilt the camera down on me. And I saw it and I was so furious and said, turn the effing camera off, because I couldn't stand that he was willing to just get a quick shot of it before they called the ambulance, you know.
Ellen didn't like it too well, and she went to see her chiropractor, and chiropractor said, you're all right. In a couple of days, you'll get over the soreness. But that's show business, I guess.
It was way beyond what anyone needs to do to make a movie.
Well, it was a very difficult film. Billy was reaching for the limit. He was committed to it, and he was obsessed by it himself, and that obsession was contagious.
He knew what to do with this film from the minute that he read the book. And it was his vision, so all of us just participated by doing what he wanted.
Billy didn't kid around. When he said he liked something, he really liked it, you see. He never flattered.
And he knew how to make each one of us work. And that in itself was very interesting because I got to watch everything from the bed.
And you never knew when he was going to explode or not explode. So there was always a tension on the set.
Oh, come on, shut up in there!
Billy can be totally irascible. Billy has reduced me to tears on more than one occasion.
But he also liked to stimulate the actors. So he would sometimes shoot off a gun or something when he wanted someone to look startled.
And that's really what pissed me off. And I told him, I said, never do that again. You know, I'm an actor. I don't need all these artificial stimulants.
Well, the actors got used to this. And they'd come in the morning, and I had a good relationship with them. And like Max would walk in and say, "Good morning, Owen. Where are the guns this morning?" I said, "Well, there's a 45 behind that wall and a shotgun behind that one." He said, "Thank you very much."
Well, I enjoyed very much working with him. Although it was, he used maybe sometimes methods that I was not used to.
My dear friend Billy Friedkin is a maniac. And I love him, but he's a maniac.
Billy would do anything to motivate an actor. After Jason Miller dies, when Father Bill goes in to give him the last rites, we did 13 takes, 15 takes, 17 takes, I'm not quite sure.
Do you want to make a confession?
Bill Friedkin wanted Father Dyer to react in some emotional way. This is his best friend lying there in a pool of blood.
And Father Bill could never get it right.
So Billy comes over to me and says, "Bill, you're just doing this by the numbers."
He was a non-actor. He couldn't emote.
And I said, "Billy, I have just given my best friend the last rites 15 times in one night, and it's now 2:30 in the morning."
Friedkin and I had a little signal that we'd use to silently roll the camera and sound. And he asked me at this time to do just that.
And he said, "I understand." He said, "Do you trust me?" Well, you always trust somebody unless they ask you.
And Billy went in and slapped him across the face.
He belted me right across the chops and backed off. And I went in the scene, and if you look at that carefully, when I'm giving the last rite, my hand's going like that. And I wasn't making my hand go like that. That was sheer nerve juice.
He looked at himself and bumped just a cut to it. How many blood was it?
He was tough, but it was very stimulating. He drove me to some of the best work that I'd done up to that time. A makeup artist gets a great thrill changing someone's face because, in a sense, he is creating a new living creature. I was faced with the problem of making this 12-year-old little girl, very pretty little girl with apple cheeks and a butterball nose, make her into a demon. And it was an incredible challenge.
God bless Dick Smith. Certainly nothing could have prepared anybody for what that experience was going to be. First, he had to do the casting of the face. He created different makeups, which we tested.
I think it was 6 different, all different makeups. The very first one I did was a all-out witchy makeup with a black wig and bushy eyebrows, and it was terrible. But it proved one thing, and that was that I could take this round face and make it look pretty horrible. So then it was a matter of kind of backtracking, and I tried. There were several other more moderate makeups. There was one that seemed to be promising. We filmed it, and Billy said, "It's no good. It doesn't work." And the reason, I had to agree, the reason it didn't work was because the dialogue of the other people in the scene didn't match this horror.
One day I had the thought that the disfiguration that results in her face should come from something that Reagan did to herself. And I thought, what if in the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, we see that her whole face is streaming with blood, fresh blood, as though she had used the crucifix to scar herself.
The makeup, once established, progressed. And here she's got even more wounds and stuff on her face. I had to keep making it worse. The cuts became kind of raised welts or scars, but I placed them very strategically.
Almost like nightmarish shapes, but all growing out of the idea that she scarred herself with the crucifix, and these are gangrenous sores.
And I changed her mouth. I thickened the upper lip, and I gave her a thick, distorted, cracked lower lip that kind of drooped over to one side, and that twisted her mouth.
And then he took a cast of my tongue. And so this, yeah, it was fit on my tongue perfectly, and it was just, I just had to ball it all up and stick it in my mouth. But I mean, it's horrible in the movie. It is, I admit. That's just a horrible, horrible thing to look at.
To confront this cruel demon.
And of course, the contact lenses were the other key thing. And Linda could never get used to them. So I had to put anesthetizing drops in her eyes before putting them in.
What's that? It was a very painful process, and of course I had them in different sizes and shapes, and the big ones, the ones that whited out my eyes, were actually the most comfortable of all of them.
I was concerned for Linda. I think we all were kind of concerned because she was young and innocent and not into this thing at all.
She was just a kid that liked an ice cream soda in between, and they would laugh, and as soon as you said roll it, boom, she turned on this demon.
Almighty Father, everlasting God, and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Even the stagehands would kind of cringe when she had to say foul language.
No one was allowed to laugh. The fact that there were very few people on the set while filming allowed me to say the dialogue that I was being asked to say, because nobody made anything weird about it, and I'm sure their ears must have just been like, oh my God.
I do remember, though, you know, Max is such a gentleman, such an aristocrat, really.
You're
It's
unworthy.
the first time the girl's going to say her dialogue, frequencies action. And Linda looks up with beautiful blue eyes and that cherubic face and says, your mother sucks cocks in hell. And Max goes, cut. He said, I've just lost it, Billy. I've just lost it.
So one day I asked her, I said, Linda, how do you feel when you have to say these lines? She says, oh, it's not me, it's Reagan.
Her capability at that age of handling what she went through was remarkable, totally remarkable.
She just divorced herself from this horrible character and even from the language.
I certainly, as an assistant director, felt for this 13-year-old girl who was in makeup for 4 hours every morning before she even got on the floor.
It took hours to light every shot, and so you couldn't keep Linda Blair in that, or another 12-year-old in that rig for hours. Eileen Dietz was about 25 or 26 years old. She was the same size as Linda, who was 12. We'd light Eileen Dietz and get her out and put Linda Blair in to do the scene.
So he may no longer hold captive this person.
There are a couple of shots that we did with Eileen Dietz where, like, she backhands the doctor and knocks him across the room and we're behind her. Obviously, Eileen's blow was much more powerful and believable. In the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, when the crucifix goes into the crotch area, that's Eileen Dietz.
I didn't ever think they would allow us to film or exhibit the crucifix masturbation scene, and yet I couldn't think of how to do without it.
I didn't understand what masturbation was at that age. So I didn't understand, you know, there was a box and a sponge and Karo syrup with red food coloring. And that was between my legs. So I just had to put the cross into the box. That's all I was doing. I had no idea what it was until many years later.
When I was writing the novel, I said, now I have come to the point where this woman, this non-believer, in desperation, is going to go to priests, to witch doctors. What on earth could drive her to that? What is the worst possible thing I can think of?
I think it was merited, and I think it served a purpose. It was probably one of the most vicious things I've ever seen in a film.
It certainly does make this statement of to what lengths evil will go to manifest.
To this day, even with sensibilities that you think are so utterly jaded and depraved, it remains the most shocking piece of footage I have ever seen.
There were various different effects that had to be done in the script, and one of them was the head turning around backwards. The only way to do it was to make a dummy and have a mechanical head.
We sat down together, and Dick says, if you'll do everything on the inside, I'll do everything on the outside.
The head and the torso are rigid plastic because the head had to rotate smoothly.
The only problem was going to be the separation. But if I spun the head, the hair would come down and cover up the crack. So I could spin the head. I could go around 2-3 times if I wanted to.
Amen.
I worked on the eyes, and I used remote control.
Let my cry come unto thee.
And she would sit there and look at you in the room. It was frightening. It was so alive. In fact, I didn't want to call it a dummy. I quit calling it a dummy because it was embarrassing. I said, I don't want to call you a dummy. We decided we were going to try it out, so put it in the front seat of a taxi in the summertime in New York City.
The head would wobble around, so it would look like it was alive.
And the people would stare at this thing, and then finally it would just spin its head around, and that was it. And then tell the cab, get out of here.
See the cross of the Lord. Begone you hostile power.
This is the device I made to create the vomiting effect. This side piece is actually a very thin, flat tube, and there's a little nozzle connecting the two. I can take this apart, and the tubes would be hidden behind the head of the person. Actually, it was not Linda Blair, but Eileen Dietz that was used for this rather unpleasant task, and it would fit snugly on her face like this. And then I connected these to a special pump that Marcel Vercouter had loaded with hot pea soup. I understood that what was wanted was a kind of diffused spray, not a single stream. And that's what we did. I didn't learn till years afterwards that in the editing, that Billy didn't like the garden hose type, and he wanted that blob hitting in the face. So it was matted in. That was one of the first optical things that was done.
I was on the other side of the bed with my rig, and I'm supposed to hit Jason in the sweater.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, geez, might probably better if they really hit me in the face, you know, because it really...
I got all set up, and now they changed the lights, and they did this and that, you know. Pretty soon, I said, maybe my vomit is getting a little cold. So I raised up trajectory a little bit, and I maybe cranked on a little bit. And anyway, when I let go, I hit Jason flush in the face.
My momentary reaction was, yeah, I was a little pissed off.
He went backwards, and he was, if he could have got a hold of me, everybody on the set went, ah. And I felt like a, you know, and so they said, clean Jason up and we'll do it the right way. So they cleaned him up, got him another sweater, and we shot it 3 or 4 times after that. But then after they started to put it together and they saw the expression on his face, that is actually the one they used. It was a nice mistake. I enjoyed it, Jason didn't.
You remember in the little girl's room, whenever she went demonic, the room became extremely cold.
And of course, how do you make breath show in a room? Today they can draw it in digitally. It's rather expensive, but it's less expensive than what we did.
I got a hold of this refrigeration fella, and I built this giant cocoon.
So we had 4 massive air conditioners, which we found we had to turn on all night. And by the time we got to the set the next morning, it was 30 or 40 below zero.
He wanted to see the breath of the actors, and I think also in the back of his mind he decided that the extreme cold would really influence the performance as well.
It was difficult to act and express facially emotions when your face was frozen, literally.
The perspiration was freezing on my hair was frozen.
One morning, we had a lovely surprise. We came in and found that there was like a thin, thin layer of snow over the entire set. That somehow a lot of moisture had gotten into the atmosphere and it had condensed.
Be silent!
We're all there in our Arctic cold weather Eddie Bauer special, suits, and she's in her nightie.
It's the power! Holy water.
Was it cold? Yes. Did I like it? Not much. It's probably why I hate cold so much nowadays. I was cold, yeah.
For the first time, I said to myself, you got principal actors, not in Alaska, not in an ice house, on the set in the middle of the summer in New York City, seeing breath.
But every time Owen would turn his lights on to light a shot, the temperature of the room would increase.
And after maybe an hour and a half of filming, the temperature would go above freezing, so you had to shut down, shut off all the lights, and build up the cold again.
And this would go on, for days and days and days and days. We were in that cold room for 60 days.
The head of production of Warner Brothers came in from time to time, flew in to see why it was taking us so long to do this, and he would stand in the back of the set just shaking his head with his mouth. He couldn't believe, and no one really could believe this was going on or that would ever produce anything like a believable result.
When the arduous process of filming was completed, William Friedkin brought The Exorcist here to the appropriately numbered location of 666 Fifth Avenue. It was here that a team of editors laboured to whittle down over 200 days of shooting into a coherent 2-hour movie.
We approached The Exorcist not like a horror film. It was more of a combination of Billy Friedkin's background of being a documentarian as well as a theater, a director, and a live director. We kind of knew each other's rhythms. The film really dictated what the pace was going to be. Nowadays, you would consider it almost slow. It would be slow and methodic, and all of a sudden, things would happen, and it would just, all hell would break loose.
I don't want it!
And the film doesn't feel long because it's constantly bombarding you with things, and then it would let you breathe, and then it would bombard you again.
When I started the film, I had no idea how we were going to do the demon voice.
And Billy pulled out a book of Hieronymus Bosch paintings and said, I want Linda Blair's voice to sound like Hieronymus Bosch. Didn't necessarily make total sense to me, but the impression was that Linda Blair's voice should be a kind of chorus of voices. And at the center of it should be whatever we in general consider to be evil.
Who are you?
Now on there!
We took Linda Blair's voice in the pre-production and we spent 150 hours making Linda Blair's voice into a different voice.
Your mother's in here with us, Karis.
We made her sound bad, evil.
And I'm the devil!
We played the stuff for Friedkin, and he turned around and he said, that's no good. I thought, oh, fuck, 150 hours of work just out the window.
Billy just thought another voice would be better than trying to treat Reagan's into some electronic system, which we didn't really have technically at that time.
As I started to verbalize to Bill and others that the demon should not in any way be a man's voice, But it should be a kind of neutral voice, neither male nor female, but with male characteristics, but with female characteristics. Who the hell sounds like that? Who has ever sounded like that? And the name Mercedes McCambridge came into my mind's eye. She was a great actress and had this most distinguished voice. We gave her raw eggs and whiskey, and she started chain smoking, and I lashed her to a chair.
Now kindly undo these straps.
The most curious things would happen in her throat. Double and triple sounds would emerge at once. Wheezing sounds, very much akin to what you could imagine a person inhabited by various demons would sound like. Basically, she performed it under great duress, and I was like stunned at what she put herself and allowed me to put her through in order to accomplish this.
They were all human voices in most cases. Sometimes we put some animal voices in. He likes to mix voices up occasionally, different sounds to create a sound.
Now and then.
Is the language all right?
There was a trial and error, put a bunch of them together, listen to them until finally you arrive at the one that he likes.
I felt that the sound could have a dynamic that swung between loud, very loud, oppressive noises and total dead silence.
I don't think there was anything like it, sound-wise, up to that point where everything was just super exaggerated.
It took 16 weeks to make this track, and we did a lot of experimentation with various noises.
You just play it against the picture and see what happens, and create what we call the mohawk, which is the mohawk is like when two dogs see one another and all of a sudden the hair goes up on the back of their neck, bad vibes. And well, there's certain music that does that. There's certain sounds that do that. We were trying everything. I got fake fingernails and would scratch stuff, or we'd get rats and bring them in and have them run around a box. This is The Run, Nagel, Hamsters, and the Cage, track 2. Took a bee and did, what every kid does with insects, puts it in a jar and punches holes in the top, and the bee started buzzing around, and I just stuck the mic there. Sometimes they would be processed. So I thought, well, where could you really get, a massive sound of horror, on an audible level? And so I said, well, the slaughterhouse,
I saw a film called El Topo, and I said to my production manager who did that sound, he said, there's a guy named Gonzalo Gavira. He spoke not a word of English, but we brought him in here and showed him the film, and he was flabbergasted. He didn't understand any of the words, but he got what was going on. He actually stood in front of a mic with the film on the screen behind him like that. We opened a mic, and he would use his body and objects and things, cans and various things, and he created a lot of the sounds that you hear in the film. He borrowed an old leather wallet, a cracked old leather wallet that had, as this does, credit cards in it from someone on the sound crew. And he held this cracked leather wallet up to a microphone like this. That became the sound of the little girl's head turning around. That and a number of other sounds were created in front of an open mic by a Mexican peasant who had no shoes.
The power of Christ compels you!
The original composer was Lalo Schifrin, and Billy Friedkin had brought Lalo in to screen the film.
And there was a lot of pretentious ooga booga about, the kind of presence or feeling or vibe that the music was supposed to have.
Lalo said, "Trust me, it'll be wonderful." So he went away and he wrote the score of The Exorcist.
When the time came, it was like, I don't know how many people were out there, like, 100 of LA's finest musicians strike up the band. And anyhow, Lalo's sitting there with his chest out, and they play this score. It's a beautiful score, but it was all over. It was kind of a silence. And it was like, get this fucking Brand X Stravinsky out of here. I mean, he went ape shit. Billy did.
So they stopped the recording right in the middle. I mean, you have 110 guys standing there, and you just say, go home.
And fired him right there on the spot with his wife and his agent and everybody. I mean, it was like, look, that's it.
And Billy says, give me that music. So we took the music off the recorder, handed it to him. He ran out in the front of the Tadeo and threw it across the street into the parking lot. He said, that's where that music belongs.
Billy said to me, did you ever hear of a record called Tubular Bells? I said, yeah, Mike Oldfield. He says, go up and get that.
After cutting the opening sequence of Iraq, we kind of went through the whole film and repaced it. Looking at it, I thought, well, there's a lot of exposition, basically, that you really don't need because it's slowing the film down, like taking a walk with Reagan through Washington, seeing all the monuments. Sequences like that didn't pertain, really, to where this film was going.
Chris McNeil.
Please go away.
I'm Father Karras.
After 2 years of working on the movie of The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty found himself pleading with William Friedkin to leave certain scenes in the final cut of the movie, scenes which Blatty thought were essential, but Friedkin found superfluous. These included an early medical examination of Reagan, a discussion about the nature of her possession between the two priests, and an upbeat epilogue designed to give the movie a more positive ending. Blatty loved those scenes, but Friedkin cut them, and they haven't been seen since 1973.
I know that there's been a lot of controversy about certain scenes that are out of the film, particularly the last scene. My feeling as the interpreter of that material was, we don't need it.
But there's a sense in which we did need it, Bill.
Father Dyer, you like films? Sure.
Many people, to this day, interpret The Exorcist as a downer.
Well, I get passes. In fact, I got a pass to the Crest tomorrow night. Would you like to come? What's playing?
I thought that the scene from the novel between Kinderman and Dyer would allow the audience to feel, hey, cool it. Everything's okay.
I've seen it. Another one. Had your lunch? No.
You knew this relationship that Karras had with Kinderman lives now through Father Dyer. God's in his heaven. All is right with the world. That's something I think that the film could use.
I don't want to direct the way people think about this beyond what is already, to me, self-evident. People actually believed what they saw on the screen. Some of them maybe had a different interpretation of that. That's always bothered you. I've always rejoiced in it.
You son of a bitch!
Everybody who sees the film takes from it what they bring to it.
Sure. God damn you! Take me! Take me!
I don't want him to think the devil won. I just don't.
Well, to me, it's how could they possibly think that? Because this relates to certain other cuts in the film. The dialogue between Marin and Karras in a kind of a break in the exorcism scene, which in the film now is just two guys sitting on the stairs, but which you had written a quite beautiful dialogue for the two of them.
Why this girl? It makes no sense. I think the point is to make us despair. To see ourselves as animal and ugly. To reject the possibility that God could love us.
Of all the scenes cut from The Exorcist, the most talked about is unsurprisingly not some theological exchange, but a creepy special effect known simply as the spider walk. Although it hit the cutting room floor at a very early stage, this eerie sequence, which features in Blatty's novel, has become legendary among fans of the movie.
Chris has just come back from the doctor's office, and she knows now they've got to get a psychiatrist.
Hi, Chuck. Come on in.
Suppose he heard.
Heard what?
Haven't heard.
Burke is dead, and then...
Burke is dead, and then in the novel, Sharon gasps, and Chris turns and looks, and down the steps is Reagan coming, contorted.
Walking
backwards, looking for all intents, like a tarantula.
So on the one hand, she had to cope with the death of her friend. I could not make the transition to how she would have reacted right on top of that to the spider walk.
Bill, it may have been could be a problem in the writing. I really mean that, because what you're asked to do there is deal with a double climax.
Well,
either
three.
one is the end of the scene.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
I just thought of how I should have written it, Bill. Actually, the moment she hears the words, "Burke's dead," there should have been a scream instantly from Sharon, Chris, before there's any time to react to that, and the boom.
That would have been great.
Oh, God.
Take two on flight.
Billy stayed in New York, and I had to go to the screening. And it was the first time anyone had seen the film but the filmmakers. And there was only 5 executives allowed to come to the screening, and there was a guard at the door.
We all look at the movie, and it's a shocker. It's a shocker.
All the executives got up and they just looked at each other and didn't know what to say.
There was one gentleman, a high-level executive, who suggested that it might be best if we shelved the film and never distributed it.
They were really, I think, torn about the power of it.
He thought it was just totally obscene and should not be shown to people.
And they said, we have to call Billy Friedkin right now, and they all just walked out of the door.
They talked about it for about 5 minutes and shut down that idea.
The next thing I heard, Billy was on an airplane coming to Los Angeles to finish the film. If they didn't like it, he was going to stay in New York.
The first time I saw the film was at a sneak preview, and I sat next to Billy. And I remember we held hands and practically broke each other's fingers with the tightness of the grip.
The film started, it's just a natural opening with the Iraq sequence, a la kind of documentary feeling. And then it gets into the Georgetown, and it gets a little more intense.
Who are you?
There was a moment where the whole audience together went, oh, like that. And I realized that everybody had been holding their breath together.
There was a lot of disturbances early on in the movie, a lot of noises and strange reactions happening.
I saw a woman walk she must have been in the 3rd row, walking up the aisle, a little unsteadily, with her hand to her head. And when she got close enough, what I heard her saying was, "Jesus, Jesus."
Jesus. People started screaming at the screen. They started hiding and ducking, and some people were running up the aisles to get out.
And when it was over, nobody applauded. Everybody just sat there. They didn't know what they had seen.
And my heart sank. I said, we're dead. We're dead.
7 or 8 of our top executives are seated alone in the theater. Joe, what happened here tonight? I don't know, fellas. Why were people running up and down the aisles? They were getting sick. What do you mean getting sick? They were getting sick physically. They were throwing up. Okay, what else happened? Fellas, I don't know what happened tonight. I saw the same film. All I tell you is the other 900 people who saw this film are all congregated outside this theater, talking. Not one person has gotten in their car to leave yet. That's what you got, fellas. That's your movie.
They didn't know if it was going to be an art house film or a little horror film or whether they were going to take a bath. You know, they really didn't know what they had. And until the public started telling them what they had.
I remember the day that it opened, being in my kitchen and turning on the television and seeing people who had been in line for 4 hours before the movie theater opened in a blizzard.
It was really volcanic when it first came out. They only opened in New York in one theater, and they were literally lined up around, I think, 2 or 3 blocks.
We never had enough theaters, so we had to add theaters nightly to it, for the lines.
And it was in every newspaper, magazine.
Which is what happens on an event kind of movie. It just transcends anything that any publicist or marketing people could do.
I was getting calls from all over the place. I mean, people wanted me to exorcise their daughters, exorcise their cat, exorcise their house. But I got a call from Warner Brothers again, from London, saying, would I please go up to Milano? Because they were opening the next night, and they heard that already the whole city was in an uproar. And so they wanted to have a psychiatrist and myself present to deal with the uproar in the city.
It has a very strong impact, and if you are, how should I say, if you have a lively imagination, anything can happen with a film like that if you're not prepared.
Billy Graham said publicly at the time the film was in the streets,
There is a power of evil in that film, in the fabric of the film itself. I have great respect for Billy Graham. I thought that one of the most foolish statements I've ever heard. I would have attributed it to senility, except he was only 39 or 40 at the time. There is an evil in this movie, but it forces you to confront it. It doesn't pussyfoot around it.
Yes, I think there is evil in the film, and it was intended that there be evil in the film. And yes, I think that there is good in the film, and that was intended too, and good does win.
I have no doubt, strangely enough, paradoxically, if you will, it has been a force for good. It, among other things, it did do what I wanted him to do in the first place, to awaken people to the full dimension of the problem of iniquity, as the theologians call it, but I was also very happy, I told you, that he also pointed out the mystery of heroic goodness, of extraordinary goodness.
From my point of view, is there a message? Yes, which is to follow a positive spiritual walk in life. We're only here for a short period of time. Can you go the wrong way? Absolutely. This film shows you that.
I was shocked by the perspective it opened for me about our days and our attitude to a younger generation and to children.
It was a movie that was
ahead of its time. I think it was maybe too intelligent for some people to realize what it was really about, and they were afraid of it.
It's an illusion, a very effective illusion, you know. I mean, but that's what art's supposed to do, is take you to another place where you haven't been before.
And I think all the people that make these outrageous claims about it just don't know what they're talking about. Perhaps it can affect you that way. Well, good. I'm glad it affected Billy Graham that way. I'm sure it's a lot better than having him sit before some, stupid film on television that portrays Jesus with a halo around his head and people, getting all goo-goo-eyed around him and, the way Christianity is normally portrayed.
The demon is a liar. He will like to confuse us. But he will also mix lies with the truth to attack us. The attack is psychological, Damien, and powerful. So don't listen.
There is a power to move you and have a disturbing effect upon the viewer, which is greater than the sum of any of its parts. It's enormous, and it's mysterious. But my God, it's not a power of evil.